Before I even begin this insane story, let me just say this. If you enjoy tales where arrogant people finally get what they deserve, where justice comes knocking in ways they never expected, then you're going to love what you're about to read. So make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss the wild ride of drama, betrayal, karma, and pure satisfaction that follows when a so-called HOA Karen tried to turn my life upside down but ended up getting crushed by her own arrogance. It all started the summer I decided to finally spend more time at my cabin, a modest log place my grandfather had built decades ago on the edge of a quiet lake community, a retreat where I had hoped to escape city stress, breathe in fresh pine air, and maybe finish that novel draft collecting dust on my laptop. But what I hadn't expected was that my peaceful getaway would turn into a battlefield with the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood association, a woman who everyone whispered about, who strutted around like she owned the whole subdivision, and who I would later come to know infamously as Karen, the type who polices grass length, yells at kids biking too fast, and thinks calling the cops is her personal weapon of choice, though I wouldn't have guessed that my first real run-in with her would involve her own son breaking into my cabin, getting hauled off in cuffs, and her entire sense of power collapsing before the entire neighborhood. It began innocently enough, with me arriving one Friday evening, cooler of food in the backseat, dog excited in the passenger seat, and the sunset streaking orange over the lake. But within hours I got my first dose of neighborhood politics when a woman in oversized sunglasses and a perfectly pressed sundress approached my driveway as I unloaded, clearing her throat dramatically as if summoning attention, and asked in a voice dripping with entitlement if I had filed the proper paperwork to stay extended weekends, since, according to her, the law required notification for cabin occupancy longer than 72 hours, which was absolute nonsense, and when I politely asked her name, she gave me the clipped reply, "I'm Karen, president of the HOA, and we like to keep order around here," to which I gave a nod and went back to my cooler, already realizing I was in for an ordeal. Over the next few weeks, Karen made her presence known in petty ways. She left notes on my truck about improper tire alignment on community gravel, reported me for using a charcoal grill instead of gas, and even tried to fine me for having an unauthorized dog breed, though Max, my golden retriever, was literally the friendliest creature alive, so I learned quickly that her entire existence revolved around control, gossip, and intimidation. What I didn't know then was that her teenage son, whom neighbors described as trouble wrapped in expensive sneakers, had been eyeing my cabin like a prize, seeing me as the newcomer who didn't belong, and one stormy night while I was in town grabbing supplies, he broke in, pried open a back window, and thought he could raid the place for booze or whatever thrill he was chasing, but his mistake was twofold. First, I had installed discrete motion sensors with alerts that pinged straight to my phone, and second, the sheriff's department was only 5 minutes away, so by the time he had rummaged through my cabinets, the cops had pulled up quietly, caught him red-handed, and before midnight he was sitting in the back of a cruiser with cuffs on, trying to play tough but looking like the scared kid he really was. I drove back just as they were finishing, headlights catching the whole scene, and the deputy explained the situation, adding that the boy had muttered something about it being no big deal, my mom runs this place anyway, which immediately set off alarm bells about how Karen would respond, and sure enough, not even an hour later, she stormed down my driveway in slippers, robe, and fury, demanding to know why I had entrapped her son, accusing me of overreacting, and insisting the cops had no right to humiliate her family, but the deputy shut her down cold, telling her that burglary was burglary, even if it was just a cabin and just a kid, and if she wanted to argue, she could do it in court. You'd think that would be the end, but no, Karen doubled down, calling the police chief the next morning, filing harassment claims against me, and even organizing a fake emergency HOA meeting to discuss my threatening presence. But what she didn't realize was that several neighbors were fed up with her tyranny and, emboldened by her son's arrest, they began to rally, quietly at first, slipping me supportive nods and telling me stories of how she had fined an elderly couple for wind chimes, or reported a family for unapproved deck furniture, so suddenly I wasn't just the guy fighting Karen, I was the spark of resistance. The twists kept coming when I found out through one of these neighbors that Karen's husband had quietly filed for divorce months earlier, apparently worn down by her constant drama, and that she was terrified of losing her position of status, so she clung to her HOA presidency like it was life support, which explained why she escalated her attacks on me. She needed a villain to make herself look powerful. But karma has timing sharper than a blade, because when the case against her son moved forward, it turned out he had priors. Petty thefts swept under the rug thanks to her connections. And this time the judge wasn't in the mood for excuses, slapping him with probation, community service, and a record that would stick, which Karen tried to spin as my fault, telling anyone who would listen that I had ruined a boy's future over a misunderstanding, except the truth had a way of spilling, especially when her own son, bitter and reckless, started blaming her, shouting in public that she had pressured him to teach the cabin guy a lesson, because she didn't want me there, a revelation that stunned everyone and stripped away the last shreds of sympathy she had. By late fall, the HOA board, tired of lawsuits, complaints, and her unhinged leadership, voted her out. The same night her husband's lawyer finalized their separation, leaving her humiliated, powerless, and exposed. But the real crushing blow came when the sheriff himself, fed up with her false reports and abuse of emergency services, charged her with filing fraudulent claims, meaning the woman who had weaponized authority for years was now facing fines and probation of her own. Her reputation shredded, her empire collapsed, her son resentful, her neighbors finally free. As for me, I sat on my cabin porch one crisp evening, coffee steaming in my mug, dog at my feet, and listened to the laughter of kids biking past, no longer afraid of HOA wrath. And I realized that sometimes you don't have to fight fire with fire. You just have to stand your ground, tell the truth, and let karma do the crushing, because in the end, Karen called the cops, but it was her world that got cuffed, her pride that got shattered, and her reign that burned out in spectacular fashion, leaving peace, quiet, and a community finally united not by fear, but by the relief of freedom.